Good morning, Bella Vista. It's time for another Mayor's Wrap. I'd like to say hello to Mayor Christie. Good morning.
Good to see you again.
You too. We've got a lot of things to talk about today.
We do?
So why don't we get started on the financials?
Sure.
Your favorite subject.
Yeah. These are the financials for the end of April. As you had noted earlier, we're always 2 months behind because it takes that long for sales tax to get from the actual point of purchase down to the state, get doled out back to us. So we have to always try and match revenue and expenses, and so that's why we're always behind.
Okay.
But it's still a very good news story, and it continues to be. Our revenues are 1.4 million over our budget year to date, and on the expense side, we are 1.9 million under budget, which is also extremely good. And then I always talk about our cash reserves. It's really cash on hand. By local ordinance that we brought in 2018, we have to have 25% of our unrestricted revenue on hand at all times. Our current unrestricted revenue is just over 20 million. So 25% of that is roughly $4 million.
And you are reserving that for projects that may come up, contingency kind of things?
Yeah, it's a contingency. Heaven forbid if we have a tornado or something come through here, or straight line winds like we did a couple of years ago, and the costs are through the roof, then we know that we have, this reserve on hand. The actual reserve at the end of April was almost 11 million. So we're well above the 5 million. And you're going to see it come down a bit, and we're going to talk about a project a little later on with the roads. Mm-hmm. But we are in extremely good shape financially, and I see no reason for that not to continue without trying to jinx it and have something happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
But no, we're good.
All right, great. All right, we got a couple of things today that I believe there needs to be some clarity on. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned earlier, there may be some rumors floating around, and we'll do our best today mm-hmm. to dispel some of those and talk about what is true.
Sure.
Correct?
Right.
So let's talk, first of all, about the progress with the bond in those projects.
So the bond was authorized by the voters on March the 3rd of last year. The bonds were actually issued in September. We have an excellent rating, and we have a very excellent interest rate. I'd just like to remind everybody that we do not see the money from the 1 cent sales tax. It never comes to the city. It goes to a bond trustee, which is U.S. Bank. So when we're incurring expenses as we begin to build each of the 3 projects, the invoices flow into the city so that we can double check them. If we're satisfied with them, then we send them to the bond trustee and they pay the bill.
Right.
Similarly, as time goes on, the tax will continue to go to the bond trustee directly from the state, and the bond trustee will begin to pay down the bond. So I just want to be very clear about that, because there are still some people confused thinking that the money comes to the city, and it does not. First of all, the fire station number 3 up on Glasgow, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, it's coming along great. We're still looking for an October start date. The fire training facility, I think we've zeroed in on a piece of land. We're just actually getting it appraised now, and then we'll approach the owner and see if we can strike a deal. The third is the police and the court. That's the biggest of them all. That's 18 million all by itself. It's a 47,000 square foot building, and we're actually looking out into the future for the next 30 years. And the bids from the sub-trades have all been brought in, and last night council passed a resolution capping those bids. And it's very important that you do it. It's called GMP, which is Guaranteed Maximum Price. And if you don't do that, then your costs can continue to escalate.
Right.
And as I'm sure you've probably heard, the cost of material is just going through the roof as a result of COVID shortages, et cetera. And so we are on budget. We want to stay on budget. And so it was very important that we get this resolution passed last night. It was passed unanimously by council in a special meeting. So I signed the CAP contract today and signed the resolution, and that'll go over to Nabholz, and then they are able to file the legalities and cap the cost on the project. So that's great news. We still have a problem with water. And this is where rumors abound everywhere. And I'm hoping that we can set the stage, because there are also some discrepancies that are coming out of Cooper Communities as a result of our meeting last night that are not true. So we've been talking water with Cooper and the POA for well over a year. In fact, it goes back to when I first got involved. I think it was August 8th of last year. I was on a conference call with two people from Cooper. That was Jody Latham and Jean Gluskos, who is their lawyer. And both our lawyer and myself were on a Zoom talking about water, and they still said, don't worry, you're going to get the water. We met with John Cooper in November. I didn't, but the police chief and Tom Judson did.
Judson.
And Mr. Cooper once again iterated, don't worry, you're going to have water for your fire suppression. Well, in the meantime, Mr. Cooper was then replaced as president by a gentleman by the name of Kent Berger. He was, prior to that, he was their CFO. He's been with Cooper Communities a long time. And on January the 1st, Kent and I met, and that's when he dropped the bombshell that he wasn't going to honor John's commitment for water until some zoning changes were made to some of their reserve properties. I really didn't have a clue what he was talking about, but I got, involved in it. And I went back to Kent and I said, we'll be more than happy to work with you and take you through the rezoning step. It is a lengthy process, but we'll get it done right, the same as we would do for anybody else. We're not, we're not going to make any special stuff. But I said, I'm disappointed that you're trying to hold us hostage for water so that you can get this done. It'll get done, but it's going to take time. And he said, well, I need to see results. And so that's where, the whole thing started. And met with him again later, the same result. We traded emails on, I'm just trying to find the date here, March the 3rd. And I had once again said, are we going to get water for this? And he came back and said, no, at this time we are denying your request. And so while this is happening, we're still moving ahead with the project. And we know that we've got this guaranteed maximum price looming ahead of us that we have to cap, because Nabholz had been firm saying, you've got to cap it in order to keep your costs down. And if we don't, the costs could go as high as $250,000, $300,000 more. So we did our due diligence. We looked at alternatives for water. One was drilling a well. That wasn't going to work at all. We looked at possibly not using any fire suppression and just using firewalls, the same as we did for the street building. But by law, because we're going to have a small detention area in there, that had to be sprinkled. And so we consulted with Chief Sims, our fire chief, who's been doing this job for over 28 years. And he said, look, you're better off just to sprinkle the whole building. Well, the water for everyday washing is not provided by the POA. It's provided by Centerton, because we're going to build this structure right beside the street building, and that is not in the POA.
Right.
But their water main is very small, and it cannot take fire suppression needs and be able to satisfy them. So we approached the POA, and Tom was certainly willing to give us the water, but we had to get the okay from Cooper. So At this point, I want to break for a minute just so everybody understands who does what in all this.
Please.
Cooper does not own the water system. The POA owns the water system, the pipes, and the water that they purchase from Bentonville, for the most part. But in the covenants or the declaration, it states very clearly that Cooper has the say-so on the expansion of the water line.
Yes.
So there were two entities to deal with, okay? And so we went to Tom, and Tom said, yep, happy to, provide water. In fact, Tom actually went down and met with Kent this spring on our behalf, and that was a great thing that he did for the city. And he pled our case, and still Kent said no water. And so then we decided, okay, well, we're going to have to sprinkle the whole thing. What are the other alternatives? And we can build a fire tank, fire tower, call it what you will, but the cost is very high. It's $800,000, which we would have to fund out of the very reserves that we're talking about. I can pave a lot of road for $800,000.
I thought it was 600,000.
Well, the costs have gone up. It started at 6, but as we've been sitting and waiting, costs keep going up, particularly for steel. And we could fill it with Centerton water because it sits there and hopes, and you hope you never have to use it. And it gives enough flow that it can saturate and it can satisfy in the event that we have a fire. And so that's an alternative, but it's not a very attractive alternative. I don't think it's necessarily a good spend of taxpayer money when there are other avenues that we can pursue. So the first was we need to have a look at eminent domain over Cooper's say-so, if you like, for a section of pipe where we would intend to connect with the POA water. So unlike other eminent domains, it's not something you can touch. It's a bylaw, or it's a covenant that is sitting in the air that that hangs over all of the POA property.
It's not a piece of land we're talking
Correct.
about.
And so we've gone through that process. We went to council and asked for their permission to be able to proceed with eminent domain in the court system against Cooper, and they agreed. So we have been working on that. But that doesn't secure us the water.
No.
We still have to have the water from the POA. So our lawyer met with the POA's lawyer, Tom and myself, and we put together a memorandum of understanding, which would state that if we are successful in our eminent domain over Cooper, then we are guaranteed that we will have water and a continuous supply. Why would we want that? Because going forward over the years, I don't want that water turned off. Theoretically, if relations are really bad between the city and the POA, and I want to say that they are not at the moment.
Good. I'm glad to hear you say that.
Because we're still working on other projects. But if they decided that they wanted to stop the water, they could put valves in and just turn the valves and shut the water off. And that's not a good thing to do. And so we put this memorandum of understanding together. The lawyers liked it, Tom and I liked it. He asked me to go and meet with the POA Board of Directors last Thursday afternoon, which I did, and spoke for about half an hour, answered their questions. There was a lot of angst in the room about possible lawsuits, and kudos to their lawyer, Doug McCash. He laid it straight on the line. Yes, there is the possibility of being sued by Cooper. There's also the possibility of being sued by the city. And I also made that clear in my remarks that if you do not approve this, then we're going to have to use eminent domain. And I really don't want to do it. There was concern that the veto power that Cooper has through his Class B shares would possibly impact the ability of future assessment increases. And I can understand that. And so they were all valid concerns. After about half an hour, the chairman said, well, we have a very long agenda. Thanks very much for coming. We'll table this until later in the meeting. I thanked them very much, and I asked for their support of the police building. Mr. Judson and I spoke the next day, and he told me that the board had decided not to allow him to sign it. And that was a very bitter disappointment, because I kind of thought that they would have been the same residents who voted for the bond in the first place. But I understand that there are concerns. You know, it's one of those situations where the POA residents are also city residents. And this public safety building is for the good of the public.
And we know that.
Yep.
The
for
POA
sure.
knows that.
Yep. So I met with our lawyer, and we said, okay, well, we better have a special meeting. We'll send a letter over to the POA, which we did Monday morning. And we had another thought on another way that we could possibly get the water, which was to ignore Cooper completely, because in the covenants it says that the POA, and I'm going to paragraph because I can't remember all the legal jargon, but it basically says that the POA has the responsibility to provide safety and water for their residents. Well, this is a safety issue. This is a public safety building. It is for the good of the public. And both POA and non-POA people that are within the city limits, because you have to remember, our boundaries do not align.
Right.
And I've also got about 7 or 8 parcels inside the city that run on wells. They are not in the POA. Mm-hmm. So we sent it over, and Tom came back and basically said, no, we're not going to, you know, enter into the MOU. And again, that GMP, we had already said we were going to have a special meeting last night. And a lot hinged on what the response was going to be from the POA.
So that was the urgency of having the meeting so
Correct.
quickly instead of more time to work things out.
That's right. We couldn't wait. In fact, in my March 3rd note to Kent Berger asking for water, I attached the actual engineering estimates and said, it's going to get more expensive. We need to be able to cap in the near future. That, as I anticipated, really didn't do anything for Cooper. So we put together a resolution, very similar to the resolution that we had for Cooper Communities, saying that we are going to authorize our attorney. I have it here if you need me to read it. But it's to initiate legal proceedings against Bella Vista Village Property Owners Associations, Inc., and or any of its officers or directors to facilitate condemnation and possession of property interests necessary to secure water access for purposes of fire protection at the proposed new city public safety building. So that passed last night. And now the next step is...
Hold on a minute.
Yep.
You are only suing the POA now, or both Cooper and
Both.
the POA?
Both.
Let's make that very clear.
Right. And let's be very clear. It's not suing. It's going for eminent domain. Okay. Which means we still have to pay whatever the value is that we're going to take or attach to.
Right.
And that's the law. You can't simply walk in as a city and say, I'm sorry, I'm going to take that and leave.
That goes to Cooper, though.
Well, there's a value for Cooper for whatever his untouchable is, but there's a value for the POA, and that's what we're working on right now.
Okay.
Okay? Because there's a section of pipe, there's water, there's all those considerations. So we're talking to experts this morning. How do we value it? Because the next step after that is we will combine both of them into one action, and we will go to the courts and we will say, here's the consideration for Cooper and here's the consideration for the POA, financial consideration, and here's the backup for it. If the judge agrees, then those go into escrow and sit there. The next step is we would ask the judge for, it's like an injunction, but there's another name for it. to allow us to keep moving ahead with the building, so that we don't stop just because there's litigation now and we have to wait for that to work its way through the court system.
So you think you're going to go ahead and get started?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Regardless of what happens, because this could take forever.
No, no, it
You
won't
don't
take
think
forever.
so?
No, no, because we won't have the building ready until the end of next year, and that was a question that was asked last night, and our attorney said, no, 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 it'll be long finished before we're ready for the building. If we don't win, then we'll have to fall back, pay out $800,000, and then we will have to consider whether or not we want to have a lawsuit. Now that's a lawsuit on the back end after the building is complete, and try and recoup those taxpayer dollars back from the two entities. But I really don't want to go that route. You know, at the end of the day, when Kent and I met in January, it would have been much better if he had just said, yes, I'm going to honor John Cooper's commitment for water, and I got a problem with some zonings, can you help us? And that would have been the end of it.
Presentation is everything.
Yeah, and you know, sure, I'm glad to help you with your zonings, and that's what we're doing. They're even planning a 38-home subdivision off 279, and our planners have been working with them on that. So life goes on. 11 of their properties that they
We're going to get into all of that a little bit later, aren't we,
Okay.
after the break? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, let's have a break.
Let's have a break. And I just kind of want to ask you, though, do you not feel that this could be worked out between the three of you in another way, or has it gone too far to go back? Because
It's gone too far, because every advance that we've made to Cooper, and you've heard me talk about the various ones that we've done both in person and in writing, have all been turned back. And they're hinging it on this rezone. And I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way.
But you also know that the POA is for that public safety building.
I hope they are.
No, we are.
I hope they are. You know, I feel for the POA because they were put in a very tenuous position. I suspect that, and you don't have to confirm this, but I suspect part of the conversation was, well, we're going to get sued either by Cooper or the city. Which is the better one to get, not sued, but you know, the eminent domain for us versus a lawsuit from Cooper? And at the end of the day, they probably made the right decision. It's an eminent domain. And because we don't have any hold over the POA, nor should we.
Right.
It's a private club.
Right.
And so we're in probably a better position than, say, Cooper is. So I can understand why they made the decision.
Okay. Sure. Well, let's take a quick break.
Sure.
And lighten the mood a little.
Yeah.
We'll be right back, folks. We've got a lot more to talk about, so we'll see you in a few minutes.
We will be right back. Stay tuned.
Bella Vista Community Television presents our sponsor appreciation. Audrey's Resale Boutique, located in Forest Hills. Find the perfect item for your home decor. Beautiful collections, quality clothing, and more. Make your dreams come true at Audrey's.
Welcome back. Here is JB and our dear mayor on a mayor's wrap.
Yes. Well, let's continue wrapping.
Sure.
I think what we just did was a nice kind of lead-in, or the rest of the story, maybe.
Right.
There's some other important things going on right now, and that's the Cooper's rezoning requests that are coming up,
Yeah,
or
so
that have come up.
That's right. So that's the extension off you know, our previous discussion. They decided to follow the rules and do what they have to do to have a rezone done, and they submitted 11 different parcels, and they worked with our planning people, and more than happy to help them. And they were basically wanting to move from a P1. Now let me explain P1. It's park or preservation. It doesn't mean it's a public park.
Right.
This is private land owned by CCI. But it was designated that way because they didn't know what it was going to be at the time.
And let's say what CCI is, Cooper
Yeah, that's Cooper
Communities.
Communities, Inc.
Yes.
And they didn't know what they were going to do with the land when we were first doing the rezoning, and we had to move quickly, you know, when we were a new city.
Right.
And so they wanted to get them rezoned into either an R1 or a C1, which is light commercial designation, which is fine because we do rezonings for people all the time. And so they're following just the normal process. The 11 went in front of the Planning Commission, earlier this week or last?
Monday.
Yeah, Monday, that's right. And we had a great crowd, so kudos to everybody who showed up. That's democracy in action. And for each and every one of them, there was an open hearing so people could speak to it. Some people said, look, I'm only going to speak once. But it was good feedback. And as a result of the 11, one was denied. It was a tie. And one person didn't show up for the Planning Commission, so there was no way to break the tie. And when that happens legally, that means that it's denied. And CCI or Cooper has the ability now to appeal if they so desire, and that appeal goes to the Planning Commission. The other 10 were all approved. It was a very long meeting. And the next step now is that it comes to council.
That's what a lot of people don't understand. The Planning Commission was actually there to go through a very set of criteria.
Correct.
That had to be voted on. It had nothing to do with development or anything else. The ultimate decision is
This
council.
Council. And council is under the same considerations that the Planning Commission is on. You can't jump to the proposition that, but if we're going to go R1 and it's a third of a lot, then they're going to have, you know, X number of houses.
No,
You can't look at that.
no.
You have to look, is the use of the land proper in consideration to the other properties that are zoned around it? Does it meet the master land use plan that we passed last year that takes us out to the year 2040? There are a lot of considerations. So council will be looking at that as well. The difference is there will be no open hearings. Those have been held in front of the Planning Commission. Now at the regular session, which is the 28th of this month, people are able to, at the front end of the meeting, speak to council. They'll have 3 minutes each. There's a work session the week before on the 21st, but there's no public comment at that. But that's where really the councilors will be talking to staff, and staff will take them through each of the applications, and they cannot make a decision. There are no decisions ever made at a work session. And after that's finished, then we'll come back a week later, and there need to be 3 readings because this is a law. This is an ordinance. This is not a resolution. A resolution you pass, it's done. But with an ordinance, it has to be read 3 times. Typically, that's 3 meetings in succession. So that would mean June, July, August. And we do have the ability to fast forward. If someone wants, they can put a motion on the table to suspend the rules and move to 3rd and final reading. And sometimes we do that.
If there are no issues to be
If
worked
there are
out.
no issues to worry about. And we pass that, I read it for the 3rd time, they vote, and if it passes, then there's still 60 days from the date of publication in the paper before it becomes law. And that's a state law, that's not us. And so that's the process that is now going to unfold over the coming weeks. And it's my understanding that Cooper will put more on the table. I don't think they'll do 11 all at once because they saw that it backed everything up.
I think he promised that that wouldn't happen again.
Well, he did. Gene did.
Yes.
And that's a good thing to do.
Yes.
Because we still have those same planners working on people's homes, working on permits for other construction projects, and we have limited resources. So,
Okay.
so that's just to be very, very clear on what's happening on the zoning side. But I would like to emphasize, regardless of what CCI may say, there is no connection between the zoning and the water. Those are 2 separate issues, and they have elected to make it one.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough. All right, so finally, I know you're out there, well, not you personally, although you could be, who knows, out there resurfacing roads. You're at it again.
We're at it again. APAC, who is the one that won the asphalt, is in early this year, which is good. Between that and slurry, we're going to try and tackle 56 miles this year. So that's more than 10% of our mileage. It's a very expensive process. This year alone, we're going to be spending 2.4 million. Normally it's 1.2. But there are some roads that just need repair now. And we're still following the regime from the company that we hired a few years ago that said, here's the grading of all your streets and here's the way you should approach it and in the order in which you should tackle them. And so that's what we're doing.
Is that material more costly now, like lumber and
Oh yeah, it is.
all that kind of stuff?
I used to be able to do $70,000 for resurfacing with asphalt. It's up over $80,000.
Gotcha.
That's per mile. Excuse
Gotcha.
me. And that's why I said earlier, the 800,000 I could pave 10 miles.
Right.
So we'll get that done. We'll get the slurry done. I don't know when they're coming in. And we originally had scheduled 2.6 million, and you heard me say 2.5, because we actually took 240,000 out of that budget to buy an asphalt zipper.
Uh-huh.
Now, when there's a patch that needs to be fixed, typically the fellows from the street department go out and they cut around the patch, much bigger than the patch. Then they will dig out the existing surfacing and everything underneath. Then they'll bring in new rock to put underneath. Then they'll come and flatten it. Then they'll put on the asphalt. Well, the zipper is a pretty cool machine. You actually attach it to one of your existing front end loaders and you run this thing. It's got a 4-foot swath and it goes over the area that you want to patch, and it lifts up and chews all the asphalt or the slurry that's on top and all the base that's underneath and crunches it up so that it becomes the new base.
Gotcha.
And then you have your roller behind, the roller goes over it, and then you bring your asphalt truck in, boom, it's done. So
Yeah.
you're not running back and forth.
Yeah.
And when I first saw it in action, 4 months ago, I guess, 3 months ago, I got wildly excited. And then Superintendent Button came over to me and he said, 240,000, it'll pay for itself in a year.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we don't have to keep all the running around and I can get more done. I did contact a city in Texas that's been using this for a while, spoke to their mayor, and I also spoke to their public works directors, and they're wildly excited. They've been using this product now for 4 years, and they've been able to double what they were doing in the past. So it's a good news story. That's supposed to be shipping to us on the 21st of June, and everybody's excited to see the zipper in action.
Absolutely. I think we ought to get out there and take pictures and
That's
make
right.
sure it's posted somewhere. We need some good news right now.
Yeah. Well, it's not all bad news. Some people like to think that the sky is falling. It's not.
No.
We're still going to work together, and I certainly have no animosity towards either Cooper or the POA. This is business. This is getting stuff done. And I think John Flynn wrapped it up with a comment that he made last night. Sometimes you have to use eminent domain on people that you like, because it's the only way you can get things done for the public good. And he's right.
Well, let's see. I hope it all comes out in the wash.
Oh, it will.
And we're going to be friends no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I enjoy these because I think it's a great way for the community to actually know what's going on.
I agree.
And, I don't know how you feel about it, but I would like someday to be able to have folks ahead of time have some questions that you and I could address on the air.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because that's a little bit more, not just communication one-sided. It's because you can eliminate some rumors that way pretty quickly.
Yeah, and there are still a lot of people who have real difficulty separating the POA from the ACC from the city.
Yes.
And all three are very distinct
Very.
entities doing very different things for the most part. That might help clear up.
Yeah, I think we need to say that at every opportunity we can, the difference, even though you've heard it a million times, we need to do it. Thank you,
Welcome.
and let's just, I hope next month brings a really beautiful solution and everybody's happy.
I'm sure it will.
Okay. Thank you, Bella Vista. JB Portillo signing off for Bella Vista Community Television. Thank you.
Bye.